Please welcome to the stage Microsoft's financial services industry lead, Jacqueline O'Flanagan, Salesforce's Executive Vice President of Product and Industries Marketing, Patrick Stokes, Sambanova Systems co-founder and CEO, Rodrigo Leung, BlackRock's head of tech sector fundamental equities, Tony Kim, and Bloomberg's Jackie Davalos.
All right, everyone. How's everyone doing? I feel like we are leaving off on one of the most interesting topics today. It's kind of how we bring all of this together. Patrick, I feel a little conned. You didn't bring your hat today.
That's a ridiculous photo. I don't know where that came from.
Well, I would love to kind of kick it off with maybe some of your observations from that last panel on agents and kind of from your perch at Salesforce, how you guys are thinking about this. I mean, it's kind of a big topic of conversation, not just from who's building it, but then ultimately where we'll get to in this discussion about how to integrate it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll start by being a little bit spicy. So I agree with kind of the take of the last panel that we're going to move into a world where we have agents potentially everywhere. I think it'll happen faster than we think. I don't think it's 5 years out. I think there's a world where a year from now we'll look back and think, I can't even imagine a world where we weren't working with agents, similar to the way we think about maybe mobile phones now. But the spicy part is, I think we're kind of there already. I think companies like mine at Salesforce, companies like Microsoft, have already put forward this new kind of idea of an agentic platform, a platform that can connect your data to an LLM, to automation workflows in a complete kind of trusted system that you can build on top of and roll agents out. I think the platforms now exist, and I think we're seeing certainly in the last short term, 8 weeks or so, a huge surge in companies and businesses starting to adopt that. So I think we're there. I don't think we're thinking about it anymore. I think we're now delivering it and executing on it.
Let's pick up on that. Jacqueline, why don't you kind of walk us through how Microsoft thinks about integration? I mean, like, one thing is having the tool outside of the box, and then you bring it into an institution as kind of specific of a use case as finance, And what are some of the initial observations you've seen as you've seen some of these actually, make it into this new tech stack?
Yeah, and I would say if we look back possibly a year ago or even 18 months ago, the world was a very different place. And so at that point, we launched Copilot. Other companies launched various tools as well. And those were really the infancy of what we were seeing with AI. And so we've seen a lot of take up with these tools over the course of the last 12 to 18 months. But you also had to think about governance, organizational change management. And as organizations started to embrace and become more familiar with AI, I think they've become more comfortable in embedding it into systems, operation, usage, and so on and so forth. And so when you think about, and Patrick and I were actually talking about this right before this, it's been a bit of a big week for Microsoft. And so we've made significant announcements at Ignite, most of which were centered on agents. And so when you actually think about the tech stack for agents, and Steve actually lined it up perfectly in the last panel, but now what we're starting to see is where people were originally embracing Copilot, now they've moved from Copilot into Copilot Studio, into Copilot for AI. And so now you have a full stack where you can actually use kind of standardized tools, but then move into a more agentic type model. And so we're starting to see organizations take that up. I would say probably even within the last 48 hours. The number of agents that I've seen even created in our own team and how people are starting to use them and think about it, it's astronomical. And so to Patrick's point earlier, where we are today and where we are a year from now, people are using it today. And it's how will they cohesively use it to drive productivity and operational efficiency across organizations is going to be a total game changer.
Tony, I'd love for you to weigh in here, kind of, from the bird's eye view, you run the tech center fundamentals team at BlackRock, and like Jacqueline said, we're 18 months in. Are you where the market should be, or do you think that the market is where you think it should be, kind of as we see this adoption pick up, or has there been anything that surprised you about that adoption up to date?
Yeah, so I wear two hats. So I lead the investment side, but I'm also building an agentic system internally. So I see two perspectives. The investment perspective is where's the use case? People are wondering where these use cases are. We're wall-to-wall Copilot, by the way. We have 20,000 people Copilot. But I think people are looking at the average investor is like, well, there's all this money going in, and where are those real big use cases? And so there's still questions there. I would say in general that is the perception that, and this agentic future is basically most investors don't see it yet. They ask, I must get hundreds of questions about use cases. What's the use case? What's the use case? And so that's the investor's perception. And I must get 10,000 questions on ROI. What's the where thou is ROI?
What's the ROI of an agentic system?
So then there's reality, and then building an agentic system. And so that I started this process 15 months ago. The first 6 months was just wrangling people internally. Nothing to do with the AI, just organizationally, different teams getting wrangled together, and then starting building different pieces of it. And I'm sure Patrick can comment on this as well. But and the goal is to this ROI concept is not just something much above the Copilot or a chatbot on a RAG database, but to really change the workflow. And so it's like the dog eating the dog food. We're applying it to the investment research and investing arm. So we're building that to transform the workflow of investors.
Rodrigo, maybe weigh in here a little bit, because there's a lot of different tools out there. And so part of the challenge, I'm sure, for some folks in the audience is not just picking, but then it's weaving it in. But then also, what if it doesn't work? How easy is it to kind of pick up another solution along the way? How do you think about the integration process, but also what happens if you need to switch gears?
Yeah, I mean, it's, look, we're in the lower part of the stack, right? We build the chips, we build systems, we build this platform that allows us to let our customers use open source models and bring in kind of the best of the best that's out there, and then use them for their private application. And that's really what we do with enterprise AI. Turns out, kind of what happened over the last 12 months or so, a lot of people started using that same platform to figure out, well, how do I experiment with this? Especially with infrastructure, it's extremely expensive to experiment, because you bring in a model, you do all the work tuning it on a particular hardware platform, and then you're not sure if it's the right one. Now you got to switch, and you got to redo all of that work. And so one of the things that SummitNova started thinking about is you need three things that you want to enable people to do when they're thinking about experimenting with agentic. One is you need flexibility, right? And so we created this platform that allows you to just bring in hundreds, thousands actually, of different agents. And there could be small variants of different ones, and put in a single platform, one system. You can't do it on any other platform today. And so we create a special platform just to host that, because you want to be able to actually use that within dynamically, not have to wait for you to actually bring new models in. The second one is you need to be able to actually chain these things together and get very, very low latency. I think with agents, it's one of those things where if you take too long, you string 10 of them together, no one has the patience to wait for that. And so we create this platform that allows you to swap very, very quickly, 0.06 seconds in time to first token, so you can experiment. And then, like you say, you can go back. And then finally, you need checkpoints. You need to be able to go back and say, well, what worked and what didn't work? And go backwards. Maybe you tried a few things, and then you say, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, that's not better than, you have to be able to go backwards and figure out which ones of the combination, especially once you start getting hundreds of agents and you want to experiment, what is the combination that works best?
Do some companies have advantages versus others when it comes to, I mean, Jacqueline, I think of Microsoft, who doesn't use Copilot now. I mean, it's embedded in everything, especially, I think about how engineers use Copilot. For some of the smaller guys out there, Tony, maybe you can kind of weigh in. How is it going to be, competition-wise? And what if kind of the big guy doesn't really, feel as nimble as, for a smaller firm, for example? Maybe you don't need to pay a Microsoft. Does it allow room for perhaps a smaller competitor to come in, or will we kind of revert to, the big incumbents that kind of have it already baked in?
I think, and Patrick could clearly, we talked about this before with him, but in terms of the agent competition, I guess my feel is this is, still very early, but we're building a custom thing. Patrick and Microsoft's Ignite and all what they just announced on agents, they weren't there 6 months ago when we started on this journey. But most firms don't have an internal AI labs team, a data team. It's stitched together, a whole mosaic of tools and scaffolding that sit on them, and then to re-engineer entire workflow. Most companies won't be able to do that. So then you need standardized platforms.
Talk to us about
which
those,
I think
Patrick.
you have two of them right here on this table.
How standard? Something off the shelf is nice, but the idea of like a customized product is also pretty appealing depending on who you're selling it to.
Well, I think you can have. I think you can certainly have both. It's funny. Tony and I were joking a couple days ago. We were talking about this. We do a lot of events at Salesforce, and so there's a lot of opportunity to have panels. And I always, when we're organizing them, I say, if you can't find some disagreement in the panel, just don't do it because it's boring. There always needs to be a little bit of disagreement. So I'll maybe apply a little disagreement on Tony's take here. So building any type of AI system, especially an agentic system, it's really hard and it's really, really expensive. The first fundamental problem you have to figure out, and Rodrigo certainly, this is, I think, part of their approach as well, is you've got to get data to the AI. And if your approach to that, which this was everybody's kind of first response, is, oh my God, I've got to go train a model. Because I can't just give all my data to OpenAI or to anybody else. I've got to train my own model so that I protect my core asset of my business, which is my data. But training a model is an insanely difficult task. It is absolutely not something that any organization should be doing at kind of broad scale. Maybe there are some specific use cases where you need to really develop some piece of IP and train your own model. But for, certainly the world that I live in, which is, kind of the broad CRM space, the tools that your CRM, your customer service, your marketing, your HR, I don't think you should be training models for that. Even if you trained a model, it's out of date immediately. The second you've trained a model, it's now out of date. Your business changes every single day. You can't be retraining a model every day. And then even if you could, you lose all data governance. Now the data's in the model. It's like telling someone a secret. You can't control whether they give up that secret. I can come up with all sorts of different ways to trick you into revealing a secret. You can do the same thing with an AI model. And then even if you got past that, you can mess up your AI model every time you train a new piece of data into it. So you have to retest it and re-red team it every single time you've trained it, when that's a whole other expense. And you say, oh, that can't be true. Once I've done it once, it's probably, if I make incremental changes. No, it's not. Just like you as a human being, this is a crazy analogy. I apologize ahead of time, but I can radicalize any one of you in the room and make you completely change your behavior, everything you've ever known in your life, by telling you one thing The models work the same way. By the way, that one thing, this is the crazy part, is like, I could tell you that I've just kidnapped your children. That would totally radicalize you. Everything, every like thought that you have would immediately change in that instant. Putting a new piece of data into an AI model can do the same thing. You cannot trust that to run in your business. So how do you get the data there? Well, you've got to use RAG, right? Retrieval augmented systems, and you've got to have vector databases, and you've got to be able to do unstructured data and search and query. So there, you can do it, but that's an expensive system to build. Now you've got an AI and a system that you can talk to that knows about your business, and you can talk to it, and it'll answer questions, great. But then you get to the next part. Well, how do I get it to do something? Now you've got to hook up your APIs to it and your workflows and your business processes, because an AI that just tells you what to do is not nearly as useful as an AI that can actually go do it. So this is what we're trying to build, and I think what Microsoft is trying to build as well is how do we build a platform that the small businesses can go and build on top of. Otherwise, there's a massive, expensive barrier to entry, and the rest of the world can't come along. So that's our approach, is to build that system and then deliver it in a way that any company, no matter how big you are or how small you are, can go utilize it.
Where does synthetic data come into this? Jacqueline, maybe you can kind of kick us off.
I mean, I actually want to go back to what Patrick said before I jump into that one for a second, because I think when you think about AI, we're in a position where we need to democratize AI in general. And so we don't want the large companies to be the ones who only succeed. And the way that we look at our mission across our company is to empower every person on the planet to achieve more. And this is not just tech for tech's sake. There is intended outcomes and ROI that are contributed to that. And so making sure that this is accessible to everyone, and I know both ourselves and Salesforce and Amazon and GCP and others feel the same way. Mm-hmm. It's not intended just to be for all of the large institutions. And so what we're starting to see now is what this means across partnership ecosystems. A lot of the panelists that you've had on here today play within the same ecosystem. They connect into us as agents and other. And so I think that there's a bigger opportunity for us to scale and drive productivity and efficiency and revenue savings and all of the other benefits that come from this across an entire industry, and then that will lend itself to a sentient industry. And so as we start to think about individual use cases today, some of the time we're looking at individual POCs over the course of the last 12 months, 18 months, we've seen a radical shift in how organizations are looking at this. But now people are not just looking at proof of concepts, they're looking at broad industry transformation. And so as Tony said, they're looking at the overall investment process. Some people are looking at payments. Some people are looking at fraud. And so as you start to think about how not only Tony's organization connects with the rest of the asset management ecosystem, there's even more changes that come. And so we need to think about how agents and AI can drive that productivity at scale and think about kind of agents differently, because it's going to transform. And so I think back to your point originally, we need to be provocative, but it's not about just scaling for large organizations' sake. Back to synthetic data, I think that's definitely top of mind for everyone these days. A year ago, people were looking at the difference between structured data and unstructured data, how you feed it into a model. And so we're going to see an evolution of all of these various inputs, again, as things start to evolve even further.
Rodrigo, did you want to weigh in on that? I mean, kind of, if this really is the next frontier, the cutting edge, what's kind of the next hurdle to kind of get that into, a steady state versus, we're still kind of on the ascent? Where do you see kind of the biggest hurdle there?
Yeah, I think what Patrick said here resonates with me a lot as far as how much work you have to go create if you go by yourself. And so one of the things that we really advocate for is leveraging the community, leveraging open source. There's a lot of IP that's getting created by a lot of different people that over time is continuing to get better and better and better. Now, the one thing that I would say that from someone else's perspective, we see a slight deviation from that is that people are using a significant number of agents that are open source, standard open source models that people have trained and do certain things well, in complement with a small number of very kind of tightly fine-tuned agents, experts for their business. And that's kind of used for some hard tasks that is just really hard to kind of customize for your application. And that's really a high value thing for them, or in some cases, a differentiated value that they want to go and compete on, right? That we want to go and be better at something in the market. And so we're seeing that construct, that if we can actually enable people to leverage 80, 90% of whatever they need to use from an open source community that continuously gets better, right, and we're learning, then you democratize it in a way that's not only the largest companies in the world that get to have their AI model, and if you're able to then take some of your private data, some of your private processes, some of your secure processes, and train your own separate thing that allows you to regulate and certify and all of those things and keep control of it, then that gives you that best of both worlds.
Well, I would love to open it up to the audience for any questions for our panelists. Okay, great. Sure, up here.
Back to synthetic data. Favor or against or neutral or?
I mean, you've got to use some synthetic. I think about synthetic data as useful for testing. So you roll out some sort of system, you want to test it. One, you're going to want to generate a bunch of synthetic data just to use as utterances. In other words, ways to test the inferences that you get out of the model. There's 1,000 ways to ask a question, so generate synthetic data of all sorts of ways to ask the same question so you can check whether your model is performing the way you think it should. And then there's certainly a use case for using synthetic data to train models, but for me at least, I come back to the original question of why are you trying to train a model? If you can get your data to a model in an efficient way, you probably don't need to really be training it in the first place. And I think that if there's one big kind of distraction over the last 18 months, I think it's been this idea that we have to train our own models, and the entire kind of press and media being enamored with what are the models on Hugging Face and how many parameters do they have, and it's like a CPU or an internal combustion engine. It's a piece of a system that needs to exist, not the thing itself.
I'll add to that. All the work we're working on our project, the AI, the model itself, and not diminishing any of the amazing inventions of a foundation model, but it's one line of code. And we just can plug in anything. What is the most performant? It's the everything on top that is that you need to connect into the connective tissue of your enterprise, of your company. How people work, what's their data, what's in their brains, how do you get that context learning out into some logic, and then you just plug a model in, and of course the models will get better and better and better and more performant, but you plug that intelligence into this whole system that and then that is where the agent magic happens. But there's a lot of hard work there, and these companies on the stage will help.
How long does that hard work take? I mean, what kind of time frame are we looking at here where this integration process isn't going to feel so clunky?
I think it depends on the use case, on the application. So go back to the investor question, they'll say, what's the use case? And they'll wheel out, and most everyone will say, well, it's coding, it's call center, and maybe customer support / call center and something else, right? And that is like the totality of the imagination of what people think the use case is. But I think there is innumerable use cases, but to get at it, you need to kind of integrate it and get into the workflow of that particular industry.
It's iterative, it seems, and you got to get it in
we're 15 months in. We'll have beta first half 25. So call it a year just to connect all the plumbing together and then figure out what are people actually doing, and can we change that and unlock lots of value. But I'm sure there are dozens of use cases above and beyond coding and call center. But to get at that, I don't know, Patrick, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think the use case is literally every single part of your business, every function in your business. This is no different than the cloud or the internet where, I mean, it's crazy. Like every system in every one of your companies right now runs probably on the cloud, right? We transformed our entire business. The same thing is going to happen here. So it's everything. And if you approach it use case by use case, by the second or third use case, what you'll realize is I don't need a different system for every use case. What I need is a platform that I can build these use cases on top of. And that's very much like cloud computing. You all probably work for a lot of banks that maybe 15 years ago were like, you know what we need to do? We need to build our own cloud inside of our bank and you probably tried really hard and spent a whole bunch of money and you probably failed, and now it's insane to think of doing that. You're just like, no, we're going to use Microsoft, we're going to use Google, we're going to use AWS, or if we're in China, we're going to use Alibaba. That's it, right? I think the world will end up in the same place here.
But the funny part of it is, and you can probably attest to this as well, what we're starting to see is, yes, there are a lot of these large general purpose AI tools that are available, but there are still a lot of organizations, back to your point about people thinking that they could build their own cloud back then. There are a lot of financial services organizations and others that are thinking, oh, I've built a knowledge exchange internally, and I'm using that as a replacement for Copilot or a replacement for agents, and I don't need to do that. But then they start to see advancements in technology come out, and they realize, wait a second, am I going to continue to invest in this, build the infrastructure, continue to run the models, put the data in governance, think about security, how am I securing the core foundation of the organization, where's the data going, what does the graph look like? And so over time, people are now starting to see, even 12 to 18 months in, wait a second, we need to pause and reflect, is this going to be a build or buy situation? And if it's going to be a build, what type of long-term investment? You look at JP Morgan, for example, who's very high on the index for Evident AI. They're leading the charge, but they've made significant investments in their overall technology stack and how they think of themselves as an organization. Lots of organizations have to think about what the future of their industry looks like, where they want to be, and how they're going to go on that journey. This is a very pivotal moment for a lot of organizations, and we're going to see leaders and laggards as we move forward, but now is kind of that time of reflection as organizations make decisions.
One other thing, I'm going to link it into NVIDIA's earnings last night to today. So, I would say 80% of their revenue today is training, to Patrick's, training these models. And a little bit is inference. But inference is, to me, production. It's AI in the wild, in production. And it's still small. But if this agent force and Microsoft agents go wild, it'll go from 80% inference, or 80% training, 20% inference, to 20% training, 80% inference. And the computational load of agents running wild, I mean, it's gonna just completely it'll index to agents, and then that will be the marker in which you can see is this agentic revolution happening, and because you'll see these AIs in production.
It'll be really good for Rodrigo.
It'll be great for Rodrigo. Yeah.
Well, it's important. Look, I mean, these types of things, as we've discussed here, they're complex. It's not like you wake up one day and say, hey, I have an agentic platform. It's not, you have to go through these different things. And so the things that we work closely with Tony and folks here to just understand how are we evolving this? Right? How are you evolving it? It's going to be at scale. It's going to be a lot of agents. It's going to be dynamic. It's got to be very low latency, low power, low cost, because it is going to be 80, 90% of what we deploy. Right? And so I think we have to be thoughtful about it. I do think that the one thing I do think that is interesting is as a platform company, we always thought, hey, world's cloud. Turns out a lot of people don't want to move their data, and their data's on-prem, and so we don't care. We don't worship cloud and on-prem, but so there's another reanimation of old data that's happening that we have to go understand why people are doing that. But they've got decades of data that sits on-prem. They've never used it. They don't know what it says, but we're using AI to go reanimate that data and actually bring it back to life. And so I think it'll be interesting to see. But I do think that the world, like Tony said, I think inference is coming. It's going to be 80, 90% of what we all have to do. I think we all have to be ready for it. And it's going to be what we actually get the return, the ROI on, because until then, you're just Would you say, Tony, it's basically training is going to school,
Training's college,
right?
inference is going to work.
Yeah, so let's go to work. Right, let's go to work on AI, right?
Well, we're well on our way. And to wrap up the evening, Annabelle and Alexander, I'm going to greet you guys. Thank you so much.
Stay there. I'm going to be like 1 minute. We've had a very long day, so like 8 hours of panels. I know everyone's knackered. Just wanted to say we've covered like the most practical kind of right here, right now use cases. We've talked about the innovations on the horizon. We've gone some crazy, interesting sessions on geopolitics. So just wanted to say before we all go for drinks, thank you so much to Bloomberg for being such excellent moderators today, all the production crew. Thank you to our headline sponsor, EY, who's been a fantastic partner throughout. And thank you to all of our supporting partners, Snowflake, Sambanova, Cognaze, Writer, and Rogo. Without them, the event wouldn't have been possible. And thank you all for coming, and we hope to see you in a year. So thanks so much.